Welcome to the Dracneck and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Dracneck and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Dracneck at Dracneck and Friends.
Hey there.
Today, we're joined by Corey Martin, who you may know from his work on games like Bonfire Peaks, as well as Hiding Spot, Pipe Push Paradise, Vertigo, and the recently announced Tire Boy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
That's a long list of games.
Yeah.
Getting longer by the moment.
So I think my first question is, how did you get into making games?
So I was a web developer for a long time before I started making games, and I think I just wrote games off as like, oh, you have to be way smarter than I am to be able to make games. And then game engines just started becoming accessible enough that people like me could make games, and then I just made it my number one priority to learn how it's done, and then like not ever have to make a website ever again. Well, that part didn't pan out. I still make websites every now and then.
You don't have to.
Exactly.
We had you make one for Bonfire Peaks, and now I feel bad about that.
No, I've made more sense. Making my own websites is like, well, that's, yeah.
It's less soul destroying.
Yeah, then going over revisions with clients that whose taste you may or may not align with, and yeah.
I think we've briefly touched on the podcast. I also am a former web developer, and that's no way to live.
No.
Now, instead, you get revisions like Syrenne telling you that no, the PS5 logo needs to be this big and it needs to be right here.
Oh, I'm only grateful for those. I like you know those things so that I don't have to.
It's true. I'm sure we'll get into those things so I don't have to later on this episode. So how'd you get into puzzle design?
So I was like at a point with games where I was getting really drawn towards less performance-based, less twitchy, input-based, timing-based games, and like really wanting to explore things that are worked at a slower pace, and then discovered Alan's games, discovered all of Stephen Lavell's work, and just fell in love with definitely those two catalogs. Good Snowman had a big impact on me, and I think that was one of the first games where I was like, oh, maybe I could try to make something kind of shaped similarly to this kind of game design and structure.
It's interesting because you said with like games in general, like your initial instinct was like, oh yeah, you need to be really smart to make those. And then you went on to make the kind of games that people who make games look at and go, oh, well, I'm not smart enough to make those.
It's funny. Yeah, I think that's like part of a misconception about these kinds of games is that they come out fully formed, though, as though like, we didn't just come up with these games without like endless iteration and revisions and throwing stuff away and whatever. So it's like, it's really closer to the experience of playing one of these games than like, I don't know where that train of thought was going, but hopefully it made sense.
It's funny because some listeners to this podcast, including our editor Melanie, shout out to Melanie, have trouble specifically with games like Bonfire Peaks, even just playing them, because they don't feel smart enough.
Yeah, I think that's a real hurdle to get past is the idea that the intended experience is that you struggle somewhat, at least, and that you get stumped and stuck and walk away from a puzzle because you're like, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with this one. I'm going to go check out another one.
Yeah.
So that is the intended experience, but to some people that just feels bad. It like, no, if I'm not breezing through at a reasonably flowy pace, then
exactly,
I'm bad at this game.
If this game is presenting friction, then I'm just not smart.
Right.
No, the exact exchange I think about is quote from Melanie: Bonfire Peaks was the only Draconic game I struggled to get into because of the introduction of the Z-axis was just too much for me. Response, doesn't Patrick's Parabox have a Z-axis? Follow-up, Patrick's Parabox has a W-axis.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it also just depends on how your brain's wired, you know? Like, someone might find Patrick's Parabox overwhelming and others, like, I think it's really surprising how accessible that game is, considering how mind-bending the rules are.
I also think there's like a certain type of difficulty that like people are fine like dying over and over again in Dark Souls, but they're not fine failing to solve a puzzle. Like those experiences hit differently in a way that's kind of unintuitive.
Well, I think it's also like it's more vulnerable to feel like your intellect is failing than your thumbs, you know. Or
yes, a lot of people when they struggle with Souls games, when they fail 3 times, the 4th attempt they do what failed the first 3 times because they think it was just an input issue or a reaction speed issue and not a you should rethink this issue. Whereas a puzzle game will very clearly lay bare, no, you really, the strategy you thought would work clearly will not work. This was not an input issue. There are no timing in a lot of these games, including the ones that we're talking about here. There's not like a timing component. It's not that you mistimed something. You just need to rethink your approach.
Right. And I mean, it can be tempting to still continue barking up the wrong tree sometimes.
Yes.
I know.
Yes, having watched plenty of people playtest puzzle games, it's certainly not a genre that prevents people from trying the same thing over and over again without questioning why they're doing it. But
that's something that, like, when I'm sitting with someone and like they've spent like 15 minutes on, for example, a room in the electrifying incident, and I'm like, do you want a hint? They're like, sure, give me a hint. And I'm like, the hint is you're thinking about it wrong. You should leave the room, come back, and try and wipe your brain from what you were just doing, because I don't know how you got on that path.
Yeah, and this comes back to the thing, too, of like somebody could be stuck for 20 minutes and be like, no, I don't want a hint. I'm really enjoying myself. And someone could be stuck for 10 seconds and be like, this is miserable. So it's tough to tailor a one-size-fits-all kind of game for those audiences.
I mean, for Monsters Expedition, when we added the hint system, the default hint settings are different per platform. Where if you're on mobile, we are going to assume that you are statistically less likely to open the pause menu and more likely to, and like search the settings, and more likely to want a hint. And so we have all that UI turned on by default.
So in that case, I actually think we should have just enabled it by default everywhere.
Yeah, at the time, you felt pretty strongly that the PC and console audience might feel patronized.
Yeah. But Part Self was just wrong.
Yeah, I will say I've had to explain to people that there is a hint system, because it turns out that just because you're not on mobile,
that's part of it. It's like the benefit of exposing this feature to some people who will never in their million years find out about it on their own outweighs the downside of some people don't want to use hints and don't want to think about hints.
So, but did it like, does it offer a hint prompt, or does it give the full hint on?
Oh no, like the enabled experience is just, it shows a prompt and it tells you can press this button to see.
Yeah, it shows a light bulb button in the HUD, and you can press the light bulb and it shows you a silhouette of what a completed state of the island looks like, not how to get there.
Right.
Because for some for some people, they are like, it's very clear watching some people play that game. They will kind of mess around with like pushing logs around and hope to stumble into the goal without
Mhm.
like knowing exactly how they are moving up forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, and it's also can be a like way to give your brain a break to just like, well, I'm just going to brute force this for a while just to like see if there's some configuration that unlocks something in my
Oh, yeah.
imagination.
No, I feel, you know, the the settings defaults aside, I feel good about the hit system in that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that makes perfect sense for that game, and it's probably just a good example of that. Um, you should be thoughtful about how your hint system applies to the particular game.
so talking about hint systems, let's talk about Bonfire Peaks.
Okay.
This is a very difficult game.
Yeah,
Was the
yeah.
difficulty always the goal?
No, I think if I was making it again now, I would probably err on the side of trying to make it a gentler in the early puzzles. I do think difficulty is not a selling point for me for games. It's like it's more like it's an ask from the player. Like the more difficult your game is, it better be that much more interesting to like reward the time I'm going to spend trying to do this thing. But yeah, I do think it could maybe be slightly less alienating to new players if it were gentler in the early puzzles. But I also don't think the difficulty is artificial in any way, or we didn't throw in red herrings or anything to make puzzles more difficult. So it would be just a question of like, okay, what are some gentler ways we can teach some of these earlier things without cheapening those lessons?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a can of worms, but
Holes.
I actually think that the biggest thing you could do to improve Bonfire Peaks' approachability would be to make it a different game. And by that, I mean to take some of the systems that are there that lead to really unintuitive consequences and make different design decisions about some edge cases, or to like just design a version of Bonfire Peaks where you can't rotate while holding a crate or something,
Mhm.
and like push it in a slightly different design direction that wouldn't lend itself to the kind of puzzles that can sometimes focus on like situations where the end result is not particularly intuitive. And like mostly we design puzzles so that that's not the focus of the level, but I think that there's a lot of levels where you can do weird things and get surprised by the result, and it's not obvious whether that's part of the solution or whether you need to do something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I think the possibility space of the mechanics is inherently intimidating.
Right. Right. And also thematically, sometimes like, so one thing I was surprised by is how the spike puzzles, just that, if you take, there's a pressure plate, and if you take something off of that pressure plate, some spikes come out of the floor or the walls. And regardless of what the puzzle was, they immediately felt intimidating because they're like, violent, or they're treacherous. So that was something that I noticed, like people had an immediate, oh, this is going to be a hard puzzle just because of the vibe of the spikes, which is like was a hurdle I didn't see coming when we were designing it. And subsequently in the DLC, I think there are some times we moved spike levels further back just in response to that knee-jerk reaction to them.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it. I think that one thing that I think about with Bonfire Peaks, the base game specifically, is that I think the DLC actually really successfully avoids this, but the base game has so many ideas about how to use its mechanics that people will, I think, more often than other puzzle games of this space, players will forget the lessons that they've already learned.
Oh, that's yeah. I mean, and especially that's a hurdle with all these types of games, that if you take some time away to,
Oh yeah,
yeah, it can be hard to recall all those like
but
micro
like
lessons.
this game is also really big and really long.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Hundreds of puzzles.
hundreds of puzzles.
I should say, for anybody who hasn't played it, and that we're actively scaring away right now, the
Hundreds
main
of amazing puzzles.
the main path of the game, I think, is relatively like approachable and stuff. But then there's all kinds of optional puzzles that
Yes.
get a lot harder. So
Um,
you can definitely avoid those and hit the credits. The game, that was
Yes, no,
our intention.
Yes, sorry. We've been Alan and I have had this on the schedule of podcasts we wanted to record for almost an entire year now, maybe close to a full year before we started the podcast, before we recorded a single episode, but we've held back because we wanted to talk about the totality of it and wait until DLC 3 came out,
Mm-hmm.
2 and 3. And so now that it has, like, my brain is just in full, like, let's do a retrospective. And yes, no, you're right. There are going to be people who have not played this game. Beautiful voxel game. Great puzzles. Everyone should go buy it.
And like, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't played Bonfire Peaks yet, like, maybe you're like a little intimidated by it. But if you're listening to this podcast, you will have a good time.
Oh yes. Go to itch.io. Go to name your price. Add a couple zeros, and then buy it.
And all proceeds go to us.
Yes, all proceeds go to us. No. How, other than thematically, like, how did you stumble upon the idea of using these mechanics after Hiding Spot and Pipe Push Paradise?
Yeah, so this was shortly after I made this game Hiding Spot, which was about making little forts with your furniture and isolating yourself. And,
Hiding Spot, also a very three-dimensional game.
It is. Yeah, less so, but still very much three-dimensional. And yeah, I really enjoyed how quickly that one came together, and was wanting to make a kind of a spiritual successor to it. And then I was just like, okay, there was a Ludum Dare coming up, and I figured no matter what the theme is going to be, I'm going to find a way to make a Hiding Spot successor using that theme, and I'll just let the theme decide what the game's going to be to some degree. And that theme ended up being sacrifices must be made. And of course, most people applied the sacrifices to gameplay, that you have to sacrifice this resource or something. But since I was already kind of like dead set on the kind of game I was going to make, I couldn't really see a resource sacrificing approach that clicked. And then just like, oh, but what if, I don't know, I had and still have a problem with attachment to physical things and nostalgia. And I was like, well, what if I try to make like a therapeutic thing about like trying to not hold on to physical things that are, or try to remove some of that, I don't know, the preciousness about it that I had. And then so then it just became a thematic thing. But it's like gameplay wise, the example like came back to a bunch of times is like, this could have been a game about like rescuing cats from trees or something that you have to like return to their owners or something, or it could have been any number of other visual representations of the same things. And then yeah, it's of course would feel like a completely different experience because of the presentation and themes and stuff. But Yeah.
I can't even remember the scope of that Lundari game, but I remember I played it and I liked it. At what point did you like have a sense of like was it just a continue, like was it a frog boiling thing where like you thought like, oh well, there's a little bit more here, there's a little bit more here, or like at what point did you realize like, oh yeah, this is a really meaty project?
Yeah, probably a few months later, I was just like kept chipping away at it, and then every time I would have an idea for a new trap type, or like there's some that we just didn't end up using in the game because there weren't many puzzles that came out of it. But like one of it too is like there were pressure plates that made these like platforms elevate or lower, and a few other things. Anyways, but I just kept having what if there was this kind of item, and then every time you add one of those, it's like, okay, well then how can that interact with all the other things? And yeah, I remember when I first, like maybe 6 months into development, I pitched to you, Alan, the main mechanic of that became DLC 3. And you told me I was never going to finish this game.
I was almost right.
You were almost right. Yeah.
So, Corey, have I ever told you the story from my perspective on signing this game at Draknek?
No, I don't think you have. I'd love to hear it.
Alan, I would love it if you tried first, so that, as opposed to defending yourself later.
I mean, I can't remember how far into development of Bonfire Peaks it was, like probably a couple of years, and like we were chatting, and I think I was telling you like, yeah, you could take this to publishers. Like there's only a small number of publishers who'd be interested in something like this, but like I don't know, you've got the bones of something really, really good here. So like I listed off a few names of publishers it could be worth emailing, and then at the bottom I'm like, me, I guess. I said something like, I probably wouldn't be any good at it, but it's really good, and maybe we could figure something out. And that was, to be clear, that was not a publishing offer. That was like I guess I could be on the list of potential publishers that you could talk to and say, hey, you should publish my game.
Yeah. So here's how this went down from my perspective. For the folks who have been enjoying this long ongoing what is Syrenne's workday experience like narrative that has been building up now across the podcast cinematic universe, now that we're on episode 31, I was brought on to help finish up a Monsters Expedition. And I spent about 7-ish months on that project. And as we are in the absolute throes of trying to get this thing shipped, I mean daily meetings with Apple and each other, and like working the weekend before the final build to make sure that this thing wasn't burning people's hands if they were playing on a lower powered iPhone.
Or like, on a TV OS or whatever.
Don't even say that demon's name. Yes, like as we were trying to get all of this through, Alan sends me a Slack DM that says something to the effect of, "So you ever play Pipe Push Paradise or Hiding Spot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I played Pipe Push Paradise. Why?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. I was talking to the developer Corey. He's making a new game, and I was thinking of maybe publishing it. And I was like, we should talk about that more. But we should talk about it like after the game ships." And then like a week later, before the game is launched, before Monsters is launched, he says, "So I think I signed Bonfire Peaks." And I'm like, what? I'm not unhappy that we ended up publishing Bonfire Peaks.
No, but I understand. I understand where you were at emotionally there.
I was like,
didn't need
I was
that.
all hands on deck on Monsters, and then Monster ships. we do. I don't think I've shared this with anyone. Alan asks me to do some like exit interview stuff with everyone on the team that was leaving. Never once mentioning that he intended for me to stay on board. And so I was like, at the end of it, I was like, so am I leaving? Is my contract up? And he's like, do you want it to be? And I was like, what? What do you mean you don't have a firm plan about this?
And now 5 years later or so?
5 years later.
I mean, there's no defending this. I was exactly the kind of person that would not have had a plan. Now I would have a plan. 5 years ago, I was also pretty burnt out in my defense.
Yes, you were, but you admit, like, usually a sign of burnout, usually a symptom of it, is not immediately signing up for another multi-year project.
I'm just checking the records.
Yeah.
We didn't sign a publishing contract until after we shipped Monster Expedition.
Okay, so I think you just told me that you were gonna publish it.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. Like I
wasn't party to the contract discussion, so like from my perspective, it was signed.
Probably also Alan didn't realize that he would co-create so much of this game.
Yeah,
right. I mean, because we should definitely get into that. Like, I signed this, and like I don't know, we'd been talking a lot about design, like regardless, but like that was like high level, like what design decisions should will be best for this game. And then what it turned into was like, oh yeah, I'm just opening up the level editor and making like half the levels in the game.
Yeah, more than half in the end.
Is it more than half?
It is.
No.
It is more than half of the base game.
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I think
Alan,
it's I might have more than half of the main path, but you definitely have more than half of the optional levels. So I'm pretty sure.
Yes, as someone who uploaded art assets and video assets of one by one of every single level name in the base game, you put the name Alan in all the levels that you worked on, and let me tell you, it is a stunning amount.
Yeah.
I hate to break this to you, but like all of the levels which have Alan in the name were Alan levels. Not every Alan level has Alan in the name.
No, I know this for a fact too.
Yeah.
But even just those is like half the base game that have Alan in the internal name.
Yeah, Alan just exhales puzzles, you know.
This is, and I have since like roasted him for this for years, and he every single time says, well, it's Corey's fault because Corey made a good level editor and gave it to me.
Well, more than a good level editor, Corey made a game with really deep, interesting systems to explore. Like that's just catnip.
Yeah, it was so like I you know, not to stroke your ego, but I do think you are the best puzzle designer that I'm aware of. So to have you just like dig into the game and flesh out so many things was so exciting. Like it just like, yeah, I didn't want to, I'm not at all precious about, you know, having to like have designed more than half of the puzzles, for example, you know? So I am like, hey, if we're making this game be the best version of itself it can be, like I was so glad that you were jumping in so wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and it started out, I think, as me just like making a placeholder level that would like demonstrate the kind of trick that like I would think like, oh yeah, there should be a level about X. So I'm just going to make a level that's like a boring level about X, and that's just going to be there as a reminder that, yeah, we should explore that mechanic or that interaction. And I'd do that a little, and then I'd like get to new area. I'm like, okay, well, there's this interaction and this interaction and this interaction and this interaction. And I would just like blast out like, okay, well, how do we force this interaction? Okay, here's like a thing doing that. Okay, how do we force this interaction? Here's a thing doing that. And I think we've discussed this, but like not on air anywhere. Like I actually think that your levels are more visually interesting because like mine were very practical. It's like, okay, I've got a job here. I'm going to get in. I'm going to force a setup that like forces you to do this specific trick, and then I'm going to get out. And I think your levels are more vibey than mine.
Oh, I appreciate that. I do think I'm personally really drawn to levels that aren't visually intimidating from the jump, or that are that look like you can wrap your head around the possibility space and like relatively quickly, but then also of course the choice of how the visual layout of it feels is a big part of how the level feels in the first place, even before you've touched the mechanics.
And just to tangent completely, something that makes me think is like, these are 3D levels, and like almost all of them are like very playable without ever moving the camera.
That's hard to
That's
plan.
so hard.
Yeah.
And I think we did a pretty good job of it.
I think so too. I liberally move the camera around, I think in part just to give myself something to do while I'm thinking. But yeah, I don't think you need it.
No, and like I think I would play it and like forget that the camera control is there. And like I think that was probably good because it would force me to play levels as if there is no camera control. Like it's a good quality of life thing, but if we were designing puzzles assuming like, okay, well this is a bit awkward for visibility, so I guess I'll just have to shift the camera to see what's around that corner, it would have really hurt the user experience.
Yeah, and it could feel cheap that you're like,
yeah, for sure.
Like, yeah, I'm struggling with this puzzle only because I didn't think to look around that corner. Yeah, you want to make sure that at least all the relevant moving parts are very easy to read. And we, there are some ways. I think there's some art changes and stuff that could made certain levels that much easier to read. But it's a tough thing getting 3D depth to read right, and also just like the camera perspective it's not flat, but it's not orthographic or like an isometric game or something where like something very far away is the same size as if it's right next to the camera, but it is flatter than certain perspectives. I think in part, like, so I wanted to make the levels easier to read on one level, but then that also kind of compromises on the being able to read the visual depth sometimes. And it's tough to find a one size fits all solution.
Yeah. So we signed the game. Alan makes like half the game. And then a year after we sign it, basically, we ship it. What are your memories of the launch?
Well, I mean, the big thing was just like, okay, we made a decision around like we're going to cut this entire area and save it for DLC. And then, okay, we're actually going to cut this entire area also and save it for DLC. Oh, you know what? Third time's a charm. We're going to cut this area also and save it for DLC. And that made it possible to ship the game in 2021.
I feel like at the time we might have talked in generalities of like, oh yeah, we could save this for DLC, but like we were cutting it for pacing as much as we were cutting it for we need to ship this game.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't remember if like we discussed like DLC as like the. Do you know how much like you needed the concept of it being DLC to convince you that like no, this is okay to cut this, or how much the DLC was like an option, but it didn't finalize until after we shipped the game?
Yeah, I think in my mind it was like it would feel like unfinished if we didn't somehow get the other parts out.
I remember internally committing, like saying, yeah, okay, sure, we can do DLC as my way to convince everyone to just get the game out the door when we needed it.
Yeah, and you're like, we're not actually going to make the DLC.
No, I thought we were going to make the DLC. I thought the DLC was going to be out and finished by, like, I don't know, 2023?
Who didn't?
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't think it would take. I even thought 2023 would be pushing it for how long it would take. It's 2 years after.
I mean, even the full game, like we signed that in 2020. I feel like we were aiming for the first half of 2021.
Right, and
Yeah,
then it was end of September.
yeah.
If I recall.
It was end of September. Because we launched at the tail end of the first year of the PS5.
Right. Yeah.
Right, and there was excitement around us using the PS5 specific features like
Yeah,
game help,
and Sony helped promote the game a little bit.
Mhm.
They were great business partners through all of that, but yeah, that so specifically in my head, that's the only reason we also came out on PS4 was because the PS5 was still new and harder to
Mhm.
find.
Yeah, and it's like if we're developing for one, might as well.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like if it's coming to Switch, it can run on PS4. Like, there's no
God, gosh, yeah, I forgot about that whole period where you just couldn't find a PS5 anywhere.
yeah, it was like okay, and then the player stats turned out like it was like 90% of the Bonfire Peaks players on PlayStation were on PS5.
Right, that's funny.
It's like they didn't. It's like we put it out on PS4. No one played the PS4 version. People played the PS5 version.
Yeah, and you can play the PS4 version on PS5 if you want to be
Exactly. If you want 2 platinum trophies, if you want to play the whole game a second time, but this time it looks a little worse and runs a little worse. Speaking of, I remember. So you led the port project for Nintendo Switch,
Mhm.
and we had someone, Tyler, work
Yeah, I wasn't
on.
sure. I'm like, are we not saying a name for
No,
some
we're saying
reason?
it.
Yeah.
Well,
Tyler was so instrumental in
yes,
getting he did.
Tyler helped get the game shipped on PlayStation, and then also got the DLC hook set up. He came
Right.
back for DLC 1. I don't think that we would have done DLC on PlayStation if Tyler hadn't been there to set that up in the first place. Because
Mhm.
DLC 2 and 3, we were able to just leverage what was already in the project.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like so much of the stuff that we had to do for the first chapter, it was like, okay, now that's done for the
Oh, yes, no,
entire
DLC 1 was the hardest release management thing that this game did, for sure.
Yeah, and like I know, I mean, NDAs are a thing, so I
Yeah.
don't know what to say, but it
will-
it is hard. It's
Yes.
hard to make DLC for a game for all sorts of reasons, especially when you're on a number of platforms that have
Yes.
different systems and rules. And
Yeah, trying to align everything and be like, all right, this is the most restrictive, so we need to build the entire thing from the ground up with this in mind,
yeah,
etc., etc. No, just like how from a technical level, if it doesn't run on Nintendo Switch, we can't really do it.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing to have a game that, like, this is not the first time I've done it. It probably won't be the last, but like, just if you look at a screenshot of Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 right next to each other, they do not always look like the same game. And I mean that like in an impressive, like, this game scales really dramatically.
yeah. It's there's some stuff that just had way too much of a performance impact on Switch, and also see this comes back to if I was smarter. But if I knew if like some smart way to draw all those little cubes on the GPU in a smarter way or whatever, like that's all those tiny little cubes are real geometry in the scene, adding to the triangle polycount, and it's like it is a lot of triangles for poor little Nintendo Switch.
Like, I think, like, if the game didn't have free camera movement, you could maybe fake some of that stuff as like flat textures.
Sure, yeah.
But no, the game has free camera movement, which means that you can't really fake that kind of stuff.
No. And Mary, who worked on the environment art for a while, who's like responsible for how much better it looks than when I was working on it alone. I mean, she wanted to go even smaller with the cubes if possible. She's like, because her specialty is these really hyper detailed voxel art scenes, and we had to compromise there for sure, just so that the Switch version wouldn't be an entirely different project.
Yeah, just an entire different video game.
Yeah.
It's like I think back to when Square Enix wanted to put Final Fantasy 15 on the Nintendo Switch, but that was a game that like really pushed the PS4 to its limit. So they made an entire chibi demake of that game. They just made a
Yeah.
whole separate game and called
Yeah.
it Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition.
Right. Right.
It's
Well,
like, you know,
it's a big it's a big undertaking, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah, we've only just now, like, to be able to ship DLC 2 and 3, I had to split the project into finally. But up until a few months ago, it was one project for every single platform.
Yeah,
And
no, that's, and you know, again, I think the scalability of it was just really impressive. I think that, you know, I think the fact that you can have a really good experience on Nintendo Switch is also like not something to be taken for granted. Like, yes, it doesn't look the same as the PlayStation 5 version or the PC version. For anyone who is not like fanatically sought out all of the different versions to put them side by side, which is probably everyone, the PS5 version just looks like the PC version with all the graphic settings basically on max.
maxed out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then it runs at 60. And like the fact that you can just play the Nintendo Switch version and have a great time, I think is like also a testament to how strong the game is, even like, as a more minimalist experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, just think of the first party games on Switch, like even the Link's Awakening like remake dips, like the frame rate dips down to like 10 frames a second sometimes.
It sure does.
And I was just like, okay, so it's just hard to make a modern game that runs super smoothly there. And we chose smooth running over eye candy.
Fidelity,
and like,
yeah.
So there's a couple things that, like there's some more jagged edges than there are on other platforms, but try to keep the frame rate as smooth as possible so that would be just the priority.
And one, I think that was a great decision. But two, it's very funny with the recent launch at time of recording of the Nintendo Switch 2 that now that there's more powerful hardware, Nintendo patched a couple of their games, but also just like most of their first party games that had performance issues just got brute forced into running well because they all shipped at uncapped frame rates. So you look at like first party games like Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, and Bayonetta 3, and suddenly they all run at a solid frame rate, and you're like, huh.
Yeah, it's a dramatically more powerful
Turns out if you go from roughly the power scale of an iPhone 6 to roughly the power scale of a PS4, you sure do get better frame rates.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you saying it's a 2014 NVIDIA tablet pretending to be a game console.
Yeah, basically.
Something, I think that was your choice of words.
Yeah, that is when I talk to developers about the power scale of the Nintendo Switch, and they're like, it's a home console, how weak can it be? And I'm like, iPhone 6.
Yeah, it's a miracle that like
iPhone 17 is coming out this year.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, it's many generations later. But games, the idea that Breath of the Wild or whatever like run at all on is a miracle.
That whole system is a damn miracle. Anyways, instead of just fawning over the Nintendo Switch, so yeah, it's funny because it really feels like as soon as Bonfire Peaks DLC wrapped up, you started rapid fire announcing all of these new game projects.
Yeah, that are like I'm breaking away from the puzzle space for these two games, but
it's great fun.
I know I'm coming back.
Are you? Yeah. Tire Boy is going to make you millions. You're not going to want to come back to the...
Yeah, I was going to say, what happens when Tire Boy shows up at the Keeleys?
Well, you know. I think it's just like, you know, the draw of puzzle games is too strong that no one can stay away for too long. No, I love these types of games, and I definitely am excited to make another one. But I think in general, want to prioritize like some really small scope games, and potentially a puzzle game is a good fit for that, but we know how that can go.
Scope and puzzle games, and look, if you try to pitch me on Bonfire Peaks 2 or DLC Round 2, I'm just going to give you the longest stare ever.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to pitch Bonfire Peaks 2.
No, I have no interest.
if you were to pitch us Bonfire Peaks 2, we would be obligated to say yes. So like it's a tricky dynamic here.
No, that is not in fact a real thing.
I'm telling you, as the person who signs the contracts, if you pitch me Bonfire Peaks 2, I will be unable to prevent my mouse clicking the sign contract button. But you're not going to.
The DLC, no, I have the DLC is Bonfire Peaks 2, really.
It really is. There is so much content in that DLC. Holy cow. If anyone is listening to this and bought the base game, enjoyed it, and did not buy the DLC, have I got good news for you. There is a whole sequel.
Yeah.
There is an entire full-price video game's worth of content in that DLC.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put someone that we both know on blast here. When you announced Tire Boy at Day of the Devs, first of all, I saw that and I was just like, hell yeah! Because that just brought me so much joy. Sasha, who worked on Bonfire Peaks for its original launch on PlayStation, and worked on some of the activity card stuff with us, did not put together, I guess, that the Corey that was working on that game was the same Corey from Bonfire Peaks, and just started posting about how unbelievably excited she was for Tire Boy, and I just went to Discord and DM'd her. It's like, that's the Bonfire Peaks Corey, and she was like, oh my god, small world.
Yeah, well, because when we worked together for Bonfire Peaks stuff, I don't think we ever did a video call or any face-to-face
so it's like
anyway,
seeing your face, and it's like, yeah, okay.
Just don't recognize that guy. Okay.
That's Bonfire Peaks Corey.
But that was this really exciting opportunity to get to show that there. It's funny, as giant as that game is, it still feels like you can make like a big open world Zelda-like game, and it's less work than Bonfire DLC 2 and 3.
Damning.
Yeah.
I wonder, Alan, what next Draknek and Friends related project will be at the next Day of the Devs, because we've got a real streak going between us and our collaborators showing up.
Oh, I mean, if we can count people we've worked with getting their games in Day of the Devs, then yeah, I think we can keep that streak going a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we were in 2 in a row, and then immediately Corey was in the next one.
For people who haven't been following you on social media, Corey, do you want to give a bit of a pitch for both Tire Boy and also Vertigo?
Sure. So, Tire Boy is an action adventure platformer.
It's a Zelda.
It's a Zelda-like, but with exhilarating movement, like a Sonic or Mario. I've been like called out for pronouncing Mario before, so I just wanted to catch it real quick. But yeah, it is like the familiar Zelda-like structure where there's like a main quest line and then all sorts of side questy things to do, characters to meet, and but yeah, then it's like a heavy focus on platforming and playful movement, and that's been just it feels like a different medium than the games I've made in the past. It's so different, but I'm super excited about that. It's about a boy who is a tire person. It's kind of unclear whether or not the tire is part of his body, like a turtle shell, or whether or not he just is wearing it. But either way, it never comes off. And he's just trying to figure out his place in the world and make contact with long lost family members. And so that's Tire Boy. Has at least a year of development remaining, but Vertigo, this other game, is coming out in sometime in July of this year, and it is a word game and a card game. It's technically a roguelike deck builder, but whether or not you're familiar with those, if you're familiar with them, great. If not, it doesn't really matter. It hopefully will just appeal to anybody who likes a good word game. And it plays similarly to like if Balatro or Slay the Spire were a word game. And then there's also this theming around your runs in this game are somehow helping birds migrate from their point A to point B. And the birds do little stopovers along the way, and each time they do a stopover, you play a few rounds of this word game, and then that somehow fuels these birds for their next little bit of their journey. And it's kind of arbitrary theming, but I like that it adds some personality.
I do think by the time you're done with Tire Boy development, the idea that it is an easier game to make than Bonfire Peaks will be a bit laughable. But
well,
we'll see.
I don't know. Part of it too is that I'm 7 years more capable now. So that's
7 years more hubris.
Well, sure, or that could be saying that 7 years ago,
more jaded.
7 years ago, I had no business making a game like Bonfire Peaks, and now it's like I have some experience making games, but it's just like, yeah, the edge cases and the way that the game is structured, I don't agree with now. Like as far as the way the code is structured and set up, this could all just be so much simpler if I made it again now. But
I will say that Bonfire Peaks, start to finish, longer than a traditional AAA dev cycle.
Yeah, though also I held day jobs in there and stuff. And
no, I understand. I just want to put that out for people's reference when they're
it was long. Yeah, it was 2018 until a couple months ago. So.
Yeah, 5 to 6 years is like the average AAA development cycle these days.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ridiculously long.
Mm-hmm.
But, I get where you look at that and then immediately have the hubris to say, let's just go make an open world game.
No, so I should say also, like I've got an incredible team working on Tire Boy with me. Also, I'm not like so it's their talents are definitely helping me feel confident about our ability to deliver. One of my teammates, Thomas Tobin, he and I. So most of the people working on the team, I met working at Unity, and Thomas being one of them. Thomas is like a wizard at using Houdini to generate maps, and like can just like make these. It has these hyper complex node setups that end up just spitting out beautiful worlds with rule-based placement for all sorts of stuff. And so having a super weapon like him making it so that like these, we don't have to hand place so much of the world is an example of like, I don't know how we're being scrappy in spite of a small team size to make a game like this. But in spite of being open world, full 3D, whatever, it's still very much an indie game. It's not going to be like a Breath of the Wild sized. So it just like has a similar structure, but on a scope that's probably closer to like the N64 Zelda size.
So what? No spoilers, but like, what are the Ubisoft Tower equivalents in Tire Boy?
The Ubisoft Tower?
Yeah, you got to climb a tower to reveal a portion of the map that every.
Oh yeah. Okay, does Ubisoft did that start in Assassin's Creed or something?
That started in Assassin's Creed, and into Far Cry, and then it just became across all of their games. Even the funniest one was when they released a co-op driving game called The Crew, and you had to drive up towers to reveal parts of the US map.
They're so committed. They're unshakable commitment.
If the formula works.
Yes, and then even when Breath of the Wild came out, they were like, well, there's one thing we know from other games. You got to climb these towers to reveal parts of the map.
Yeah, so we don't currently have towers that relate to the map in the game, but I think we've just found the biggest mistake
all right
that we've made.
So what's the funniest thing that you can do for that?
I definitely I want to lean in to some degree into the weirdness in this game.
Like
that's
a car
the thing.
Shop? Like a car repair shop?
Maybe so.
Or it's like a tower of empty tires.
Oh, that's cosmically horrifying.
Yeah, there is like an interesting thing where if you see a tire by itself, it's like the tragic environmental storytelling in this game, in a way that it would just be a random object otherwise.
Yeah, that's your skeleton on the toilet.
Yeah. And still determining how puzzly it's going to get, just to bring it back on topic here. There is an expectation when you're making a Zelda, like, okay, so what are your shrines? What are or something similar? Like, what are the puzzles in your dungeons like? Because right now it's pretty light on puzzliness, which I'm enjoying. Like, I often find puzzles in these kinds of games that kind of like just get in the way and slow down pacing. Not in Breath of the Wild. Like, I like those ones, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like Zelda games have done a really good job of combining like puzzle dungeons with the overall game, and games aping Zelda games maybe haven't so much.
Mm-hmm. I think part of that is that those puzzles are so focused on the like navigating the 3D space and traversal in a way that like often. So for example, in the Spider-Man games, like the one a few years ago, you're swinging around Manhattan and having a great time being Spider-Man, and then all of a sudden you're playing Pipe Dream and on a screen, so I don't understand that at all, what the instinct was there.
I mean, this is what so many like big AAA games do, is they're like, well, we need something to break up. Like, we need like mini games, we need distractions. And the easiest thing, seemingly, for most of these AAA companies to conceptualize is a puzzle in a non-puzzle game. That's what the players want.
Yeah, just bring the gameplay to a screeching halt.
Like, I sit here, 1, co-host of a puzzle development podcast, 2, producer at a puzzle studio. I play so many of these games, and let me tell you something. The last thing I want to do when I play Spider-Man is suddenly have to do a pipe puzzle. Right.
Well, and there could have been ways to do...
If you were playing a soccer band game in a Spider-Man, that would be great, though.
No! because it's never... First of all, the game design is fully operating under the assumption that the player does not want to be playing this, does not know the rules, and so they're all super, super simple and deeply uninteresting. There are never things that have are in conversation with that actual puzzle design space. Mm-hmm. They are just there because they feel like a puzzle needs to be there.
Right. Yeah, and it does feel like you just suddenly have a different game thrown at you, and that's the context and expectations are all like, if you're watching an action movie and then suddenly there's like a really dry, dramatic scene that like has a shot that doesn't change for 5 minutes, or like you're like, oh, I might really appreciate this if I was like going into this wanting a drama or something, but because I'm in an action headspace or whatever, that this has just it doesn't flow pleasantly.
No, it's frankly, yeah, just bizarre. This has been a trend in AAA for a number of years, and I honestly think this is very funny. I think the only games recently to do it even mildly successfully are the Star Wars Jedi games, Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor,
Mm-hmm.
specifically because one, all the puzzle rooms are completely optional; they're off to the side, and two, they're all puzzles that are exclusively made possible via the traversal mechanics. So they're like platforming
Exactly.
puzzles.
Yeah, it comes back to again like the what makes the Zelda the Breath of the Wild puzzles so
Exactly.
engaging is that you don't leave the context of like what it's like to play this game to just suddenly Peter Parker is looking at a screen and you're seeing it in first
Exactly.
person.
No, you're using force push and force pull a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I could very easily, or maybe not very easily, there's that hubris again.
Yes.
But I can imagine like a Spider-Man puzzles that involve like webbing things together in a specific way or whatever. Like it could be done to stay in the reality of your Spider-Man.
But that's a much heavier animation lift than, all right, now we're going to look at some 2D assets of pipes, and you're going to move a cursor around using the left analog stick, and you're going to press the X button to rotate.
We're going to assign somebody who doesn't want to make this to...
Oh, yeah.
It's their job to figure this out.
Yeah, hey, gameplay designer who joined Insomniac because you want to work on, like...
Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, Ratchet and Clank, or like the feeling of swinging around on a Spider-Man web, or like the visceralness of like punching as Wolverine. No. You, for the next 3 months, are working on this puzzle game.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the structure of the most recent Zelda games of like, it's an open world and then you just stumble across these things which are self-contained puzzle things, it kind of only works because they've also got such deep systems.
Yeah.
And like, it's a structure that you could try and copy and it would just end up with a really bad game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the thing that makes Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom good is actually not at all the same thing that made the earlier Zelda games good. Because the earlier Zelda games, like, are very much Metroidvania, like, oh, you're going into this dungeon to get this key item, and that key item is going to be really used in...
that Zelda games are Metroidvania.
They are!
We can't do this.
They are!
They are not. We can't do this.
Yeah.
You obtain items which let you progress further in an overworld.
Yeah, further, not in previous areas.
Yeah, it needs to wrap around on itself more.
There is less backtracking.
You are not
in a Zelda
constantly
game.
walking through environments, not knowing how you can get someplace. I cannot be doing a Metroidvania discourse on the Trackneck official podcast.
It would be a light pivot though to make it a Metroidvania, I guess
I think there are Zelda games which are very Metroidvania, even if most of them are like very linear. Like, a lot of them do hide stuff that you can backtrack to. So like, I structurally, I don't think there's like such a big difference there. I don't think the most interesting thing about Metroidvania is the backtracking, I guess, is my position there. But let's not dig into Metroidvanias on the Jackneck podcast. But like, I guess what I'm digging into there is like, it's unclear from what I know about the game if there are even going to be like abilities that you unlock over the course of the game. And like, I can certainly imagine there could be, but it's also, I could also imagine a version of that game which is just like, no, this is the Tire Boy, and this is what Tire Boy does.
Yeah, we've gone both ways about that, and also just like a huge part of Zelda games is increasing your health capacity. Like, is that a part of this game, or are we just doing it because that's what's expected? And as of time of recording, there is you have 4 hearts, and that's it. Like throughout the entire game. things like that. But then yeah, we have some upgrades, like a tire with chains on it for going up icy areas and stuff. And so there's like some mechanical impacting stuff, but we don't have like something along the lines of like the runes in Breath of the Wild that open up a puzzle space in a very clear way. So I think it's, if someone goes in expecting a puzzly game at the time of recording, I think they will be disappointed, but the game might shift in that direction. I just don't see I don't want it to be shoehorned in, that's for sure, after all that we just said. I want it to be like, no, because it makes sense with this set of rules and this set of systems, that you would explore them in this kind of puzzly way. And so there's some, in our dungeon equivalents, there's some layouts that involve like, rotating room setups and stuff, and like having to interact with things to progress in a sort of puzzly way. But I expect it to be pretty light and pretty disappointing to the listening audience of this particular podcast, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for that game. I look forward to exploring the world as Tire Boy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you messaging anything about when people can learn more?
No, I think follow at tireboygame.com on Blue Sky for news, and at toboggan.work is me. Generally, in the short term, all my thinking is about this game Vertigo, and because that is coming out soon, and yeah, Tire Boy is not, but you can keep an eye on those Blue Skies to keep posted.
Heck yeah! All right. Well, speaking of Blue Sky, so where can people find you?
Yeah, I think I've kind of drifted away from Twitter.
Thank goodness.
Whatever happened to that website? I haven't checked it out in a while.
At Grok, is this true?
Yeah, at the moment, Blue Sky is the only thing I'm active on, but who knows how the landscape of social media will change even in a year.
Yeah. I've been... To say I've been happy with Blue Sky is wrong, but I've been content with it being my social media platform.
Yeah, I don't trust the leadership for sure either way, and I don't trust the content moderation team, and I don't trust or whatever. But it's just like it's the best we've got right now.
You ever had a post that goes onto the Discover feed?
I don't think so.
Good. Try and keep it that way.
Oh, so you posted something and got replies you would have liked to not have or something?
Yeah, people that have no idea who I am or what I'm talking about in response to a joke. People don't actually understand jokes on Blue Sky. It's great. Very normal and healthy website. Anyways, that's going to do it for our podcast. Thank you again, Corey, for jumping on and recording. Alan and I have joked that we could probably fill a half dozen episodes recording with you, and that does in fact seem to be the case with us having gone over on this episode, and really it feels like scratching the surface on Bonfire stuff.
Yeah, we didn't get into pulling the curtain back on what Syrenne does all day long.
Oh yeah, what do I do all day long? You tell me.
You're wrapping up, but I could go another hour.
Why don't you go 3 minutes? Because now I need to know what you think I do all day.
Well, so I know what you do, what you've done for when we worked together, what you've done for Bonfire Peaks, what you do with the full scope of your responsibilities. Otherwise, it's none of my business.
Fair.
But yeah, you've been so instrumental and such a pleasure to work with throughout the whole process. Been very patient with me in my, the temper tantrums every now and then.
Why is it like this? Me? Because it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. You being basically a bridge between me and the consoles, and unfortunately being the messenger of bad news sometimes. But Someone's got to deliver that news.
Sometimes I just gotta say, Unity made a bug 3 years ago and has made no effort to fix it, so we have to hack our own build pipeline for a patch. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did that.
It's a really fun back and forth, but no, I'm just happy that it's out there and people have completed the DLC now on all the platforms and have enjoyed it. So,
well, in any decent world, when I come crawling back to puzzle games, I hope we get to work together again.
I hope so as well.
Yeah, on Bonfire Peaks 2.
It's 3 by now. We're just counting the DLC as 2, and I'm pitching Bonfire Peaks 3.
Great.
Well, again, thank you for jumping on to record, and thank you for listening to the Drakenick and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.